email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Welcome to the halfway point of 2024. As we move into the second half, I want to welcome you to the Conversation's 2024 First Half Highlights episode. I hope the year has been treating you well so far, both personally and professionally. As I reflect on the exciting journey we've had, I'm filled with gratitude for everyone who joined the podcast so far this year, sharing their unique perspectives and knowledge. And really a big thank you to each of you for continuing to tune in. Before we tackle the rest of 2024, let's take a moment to reflect on the first half and recap some of the invaluable lessons we've learned from our amazing conversations.
Joining me today on The Conversation is Emmanuel Caprais. Emmanuel is the Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of ITT Incorporated, an engineering solutions company. Before joining ITT in 2012, Emmanuel held leadership positions at both Marelli and Vallejo and earned his graduate degree in business in France and his MBA from the Columbia Business School in New York. As a leader, Emmanuel is focused on driving sustainable value creation and delivering quality financial performance for his organization. Emmanuel, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Clint. I'm happy to be here.
So as I mentioned in the intro, your bio says that you're, quote, focused on driving sustainable value creation, end quote. And I read where someone said of you that you know how to, quote, focus on the most value creating options, end quote. So how do you go about spotting and magnifying the most efficient value creating opportunities within a team or an organization?
Yeah, so over time, you get to understand what drives performance in the business setting and what drives success. The basic is to keep your people safe while they make quality products that you can deliver on time in the eyes of the customer. And here, I want to stress this: the customer is the judge of your performance. You know, you obviously try to improve internally and drive performance internally, but when it comes to business success, it's the customer that should judge your performance. And so, once you're able to do that, to keep your people safe, to deliver quality products on time, which is the SQDC framework, safety, quality, delivery, and cost, then you know that a large chunk of your job is done. And this is especially true in an an industrial setting. Obviously, that applies to a lot of the businesses, but this is how you can best differentiate. So focus is super important. Having your eyes on the prize is what makes the difference, I think, between management teams. And so that leads to repeating the same things over and over, because in a business environment and when you deal with teams, there are many opportunities for you and your team to get distracted. And so, because it's such a dynamic environment. So you got to be always focused on the prize. And then after that, once you set the plans, it's controlling that the agreed upon plans are executed and that you're ready to pivot if circumstances change. And this is a really important point, because, you know, a plan is great, but implementing a plan as you design it at the beginning is very unlikely. So you got to be flexible enough to be able to adapt to changing circumstances.
So it's one thing to have this business knowledge that you clearly do and be good with numbers, but it's an entirely different thing altogether to be able to successfully manage and lead people. And I got to tell you, for me personally, in my world, I'm always talking about process and people. You need both to be successful. And I think the people side, frankly, is much harder. Excel can help me with process, maybe Microsoft Project, but probably not the people side of things. So how and when did you begin to develop your people management skills? And what advice do you have for those listening who may want to become better in that area?
Sure. So, you know, you cannot invent yourself as a leader of people or as a manager of people. And for me, what was really important is to be able to copy what I saw that what worked and avoid making the mistakes that others made and that didn't work. And it was key for me as to be an effective leader and an effective manager. And so I think that what's really important, my advice to a lot of people would be like, nobody should be ashamed to copy something that works. Obviously, not copying it I'm not talking about exactly copying, but also making it yours, making it in line with your values, in line with your expectations, in line with the way you want to conduct yourself as a business leader and as a person in general. And I would say there were some keys to success for me. First was to communicate clearly a vision. So people need to be inspired. They need to believe into a project. And then so you have, as the leader, as the manager, you have to provide that project. A vision and also clear expectations. And I think it's key for the team and for yourself because it's unfair to expect performance out of a team if you're not clear in terms of your expectations. And so clarifying what you expect out of them and how also they need to deliver and what is going to be your role as a leader of that team. The second point in my mind is to be a supporter, to be an enabler of the individual components of the team. And this is key to be successful, and this is key to the leader's credibility and effectiveness. Your people need to know that if there's an obstacle in their path, you're going to be able to help them clear it. It doesn't mean that you do their job, because accountability is super important for a team. And so your people need to feel accountable. But I think as a leader, you need to serve your people. And so serving your people is detecting also when something is not going right, when they need your help. And you as a leader should be able to clear the path for them, remove all the distractions, all the obstacles that don't allow your team to do their job. So putting yourself at the service of the people is key. And then I would say asking questions for me has been one of the best advice I received. And I received an advice saying, a person told me, you need to ask why. You need to always understand what's happening. And I cannot tell you how many times I avoided embarrassment because I chose not to challenge, not to criticize, but to ask why. And not only ask why, but also listen then for the answer. And listen effectively. And I have to say, Clint, I'm not a patient person, and so listening for me has been really difficult because it's all about patience. But I think that it was very important for me to be an effective manager, trying to understand what people mean and don't assume that I know what they mean, and then helping them through logic, because as a leader you cannot know everything, but through logical thinking, helping them to find the best solution. And so, as you can tell, there was a lot of personal behavioral change that was needed for me to become the leader that I am today. If you look at me maybe 10 years ago, I really wasn't patient. I wasn't a good listener. I was certainly never asking why. And so that's a lot of work that I did on myself. And sometimes I still catch myself not asking why. I don't think I ask why enough, but I think that has been key for me to become a more effective leader.
Well, Emmanuel, this has really been great. I learned so much. I didn't expect to learn so much about leadership and team building from a finance guy. So I take that with the intention it's meant with, which is good things. Somebody once said, Clint, you're an engineer. Why do you care about people? I'm like, I don't know. It's just people do projects. So I got to care about the people side of things. So really appreciate your time today and all the insight you shared. Thanks for being on the conversation.
Thank you very much, Clint. Take care.
Joining me today on the conversation is Sivaram Trikutam, Vice President of the Wi-Fi product line at Infineon Technologies, a global semiconductor leader in power systems and IoT. Sivaram has an electrical engineering degree from the Indian Institute of Technology and worked as an engineer leading large-scale integration teams in India before relocating to the Bay Area in 2010 to work in the semiconductor industry. Sivaram, thanks so much for joining on the conversation today.
Hey, Clint. Nice to be talking to you.
Appreciate your time. So what do you think has been the key to success in your career so far? If someone listening really wanted to replicate kind of your success, what skills or attributes do you think you should be focusing on or improving?
I don't know. That's hard. It's always so many different factors, right? And there's there's always an element of luck involved as well.
But I think it's hard work that puts you in the place to capture luck. I think so.
Yeah, that's true too, right? So, yeah. So I'll tell you a few things that I've tried to do throughout my career, right? The first, I've always worked very hard, right? I've not shied away from that, and long hours don't scare me. And that's something that I've done all through my career. So that's one part. I've always tried to learn new things, right? I've not been afraid of trying out new stuff. And I find that I've always learned a lot from those around me. Just paying attention to what people around you know teaches you a lot. So that's something I've tried to do throughout my career. And the last thing I'd like to point out is whenever I've seen that something needed to be done, I jumped in and did it, right? I roll up my sleeves and do it, not wait for somebody to tell me what needs to be done. And this I've found, from the early days of my career, right? There's always somebody that notices someone who's going above and beyond what they're supposed to do, and they pull you up to do something more, and that journey continues, right, through your life, and you get to do bigger and more impactful things as you do that. So those are some of the things I've done, which I think have helped me. But like I said, there's so many different factors usually which come into play when you look at a long-term career. Right?
I think I have that in common with you, and that I like to work hard. And I remember that's kind of the key for me was when I first started my career was I'm just going to work as hard as I can to see where it takes me. And there's really you don't find a lot of people who work really, really hard that aren't successful. It's usually you work yourself into success, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's any substitute for that. Of course, you need to be smart. You need to be at the right place at the right time, all those things, but you also need to work hard. That's what I find.
I totally agree. Now, you've led some high growth teams. You've developed and implemented cutting edge technologies, and you've worked in high stakes projects. And when you're in those kind of scenarios doing that type of work, things don't always break your way, I'm assuming. Can you tell us about a setback you've had in your career and kind of what happened, how you overcame it?
Sure. This is going back about 10 years, right? We embarked on a new product in a completely new technology domain. The market for that was growing rapidly. Without getting into the specifics of it, right? We didn't have all the expertise to build that product. So we ended up partnering with a company to develop this product together. And the idea was we do the parts of the project that we had more expertise in, mainly to do with chip design. And then our partner does the parts that they had more expertise in, something related to the application software and the system design and so on. And I was responsible for this project. And many things went wrong in this project execution. And as a result of that, we were late to market and we didn't have the kind of success that we thought we would have with this product. And this has bothered me a while. So I analyzed this many different ways. I talked to many people who were also involved in this project. And one of the key learnings for me from this was when you partner with someone, you need to have a very strong shared vision of what a win-win outcome looks like, right? And it's not important that you know your part of the win-win. You need to understand the other's part of the win-win as well, right? And that's what I mean by having a shared vision of what the win-win outcome looks like. And it's also important to clearly agree on the mechanisms and the processes that you're going to follow to achieve that shared vision. And many times, at least in that particular instance, I feel we jumped into execution without spending enough time or effort in getting to that shared vision. So we were probably drawing something in our minds that looked like a cat, and the other team was probably drawing something in their mind and it looked like a leopard. We thought they're both similar, but they were not the same, that kind of thing. And that was my learning from that experience.
Well, Sivaram, this has been great. I really enjoyed having you on the conversation today. Thanks so much for being here.
Likewise, Clint. Thanks for having me here. I enjoyed having the conversation with you as well.
Joining me today on the conversation is Teresa Lynch, Vice President of Field Operations for Lennar, one of the nation's leading builders of quality homes for all generations. Teresa graduated from Indiana University with a degree in anthropology and political science. I got to talk to her about that one. Before beginning her career at the project management office at Yum Brands. From there, she spent 6.5 years at Sony Entertainment, followed by over a decade at Comcast Xfinity, where she was named Vice President of Xfinity Services. And since 2022, she's been in her current role at Lennar, which is the VP of Field Operations. Teresa is an amazing project manager, a great person, and someone I'm happy to call my friend. Teresa, thanks so much for joining me on the conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Now, I mentioned a couple of the companies you work for, and so you work clearly very disparate industries and sectors. So I'm just curious, regardless of the specific project, because I imagine a project at Young Brands was different than one to Sony Pictures or Xfinity, or now what you're doing certainly is different at Lennar. What do you believe are some of the key qualities that distinguish a good project manager? If you're looking for one, or, what do you think is what good qualities do you look for?
So that's so funny because I just hired a new project manager. And so I've just gone through this process, again. And as you've said, I've been through it hundreds of times over the years. And there are a couple of things that absolutely never change, right? And one of those is being a dot connector. And for a project to be successful, you need somebody who understands how to listen and listen for all the piece parts, right? It doesn't matter what meeting you're sitting in. It doesn't matter who's talking. Your job as a project manager is to take each one of those little pieces and figure out how it relates to the work that you are trying to build a team and a project plan to accomplish. And so that dot connection where I can be sitting with the president and he's talking about a strategy of something that doesn't sound like my project, but it's a strategy of the company. And I can be talking to a field operations person and they're talking about how hard it is to get something done. A really good project manager can take those two things and say, okay, what does that mean to what we are trying to accomplish as a team and what we are trying to accomplish in this project? So I think that dot connection for me is the number one skill set. And it's one that comes in all, forms, right? People can have such varied backgrounds and be really good dot connectors. I think the other thing is, you have to be pretty fearless. You and I both know sometimes people don't want to see the red, right? They don't want to see the risk log that says red. And you'll have leaders that will try to talk you out of it. You'll have leaders that don't want to tell the bad news. You'll have people who really buy into the whole emperor has no clothes things going on. And so how do you have that fearlessness leveraging? And I think you get this fearlessness by leveraging and building good plans, right? It's about the data. It's not about the emotion. It's not about, I feel like the sky is falling. It's very clearly tasks 10 through 52 show you, based on how we're calculating this, that the sky in fact might fall. So, hey, why don't we go back and do something about it? So I think for me, those are probably the two things that I like to look for, and make sure that every project manager can bring to the table.
So this next question, I'm going to kind of segue into it. I don't even know if I've ever told you this, but one of the reasons that you became, in my mind, I put you on like a pedestal, to be honest with you, when it comes to project work. That's why I've mentioned you in my book and I wrote about you in Forbes.
Don't do that.
So one of the reasons is one of your teammates, somebody on your team told me one time that the reason they loved you is that you would actually tell them, look, I'm not going to give you the deadline. You do the plan. You tell me when you can deliver, and then I'll go fight to make that the deadline. And that just, my heart just bloomed when I heard that, because that's somebody who gets it. And that's a person I would die on the hill to try to work for. Right. So with that kind of passion you have for this work, how were you able to grow that? And where did that come from? And how do you gain confidence in your career? What gives you the ability to go out to your boss and go, no, that date is not realistic. We're not going to hit it. Here's what we can do, and be able to fight that.
Yeah. I'm glad somebody said that. I'm glad they know, because I feel like that's my job, right? My job as a leader is fighting for the right thing to do. And I think, again, I have such faith and trust in, that type of project management that I have no problem taking it in and saying, look, we did the work. We put the work in. We didn't phone it in. We didn't do some backwards math with our calculator and decide yep, we can figure it out so that we can all high five you and hope that we get there. Right. And play the hero. We sat down, we did all the hard work. We talked about all the hard stuff. And this is what it's going to take to be successful for the least amount of money, right? In the timing that makes sense and not burning out a team of people. And the way we did it gives me that confidence because I can quickly describe that. I can walk through the risk. I can give them the options of what it takes to pull it in. Hey, if you want to do it earlier, I'm going to need you to hire some more people. The cost is X, Y, or Z. If you want to bring it in earlier, I'm going to need you to take these other 2 projects off the list. They're not going to get done. So when you can do that, you'll find any executive, any C-suite executive, likes having the choice, right? I'm not telling him that's the date and you have to do it. I'm saying, if you want it done well, if you want it done the way that you want it done, that I know you want it done to meet your strategy, here's how we can do it. If you are more worried about these other things, here's what you're going to give up, or here are the trade-offs. That's an easy fight. It's an easy conversation. And my team will tell you, I tell them all the time, you guys make me look really smart. I mean, like, I'm walking in there with all the things I need, right? And at the end of the day, CEO, COO, they get paid to make that tough decision of what trade-off they may or may not want. And I will respect that decision, but I will explain to them all the things they're giving up in that process. And by doing that planning up front, by having those conversations, by having a team that is committed to that and giving them the keys to tell you what that looks like, then when that CEO says, okay, right? You brought me everything. Yep, go do it. I know I'm going to deliver.
Well, Teresa, this has been great. Thanks so much for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Joining me today on the conversation is Dr. Ray Gallant, Vice President of Sustainability and Productivity Services at Volvo Construction Equipment. Dr. Gallant has an impressive list of degrees, including bachelor's degrees, not 1, but 2, in chemistry and forest engineering, a graduate degree in management, and a doctorate degree in international business. I'm tired just reading that. I don't know how you did all that studying. For the past 12 years, Dr. Gallant has worked for Volvo Construction Equipment. But as I was doing the introduction, I've learned it's been longer than 12 years at Volvo in general. First as Director of Product Planning, then as Vice President of Sales Support, and now for the past 4 years in his current role as VP of Sustainability and Productivity Services. Dr. Gallant, thanks for joining me on the conversation today.
Thanks for having me.
It's definitely my pleasure. Looking forward to this. So when it comes to, I'm sure as you worked your way up throughout your career, do you have advice that you can offer somebody who's trying to make that step up into management?
Yeah, I think that, as I mentioned, the situation's always changing. I like the work by Seth Matheson that highlights the difference between the generations. And what he basically pointed out is that the older generations, who are now mainly in managerial and leadership positions, grew up in basically a hierarchical social organization. So whether it was the family, the workplace, government, whatever, it was very hierarchical. Whereas the generations today are growing up in a very networked orientation. So they tend to view, the network as a series of nodes that are all on equal footing rather than as a hierarchy like we're used to. So given that, my advice is that, managers have to recognize the difference in the worldviews, actually, and make sure they're adjusting to talk to the new people entering into the workforce in the way they're used to growing up. And it's not that one is better than the other. They are just very different worldviews and ways of valuing the information that's coming in. For instance, my kids today have a very keen grasp of social media and are very attuned to likes and dislikes on posts or comments or things like that. Whereas a lot of the older generation really couldn't care less about that. You're oriented to look at a different metric for success or validation of your opinions. And as I said, neither is right or wrong. They are just very, very different worldviews.
Yeah, I experienced that on a personal level when my son will text me from a different room and then 5 minutes later come find me. Why didn't you answer my text? I'm like, I don't know. My cell phone's over there somewhere. Got it turned off. I don't know. So, he can't walk 2 feet without his cell phone, and I can lose mine all the time.
But yet try calling them and they won't pick up the phone.
Exactly. Like, what is this strange noise and why does it keep going on? Now, in your current role, you're really involved in bringing new ideas to life and creating a future that doesn't exist yet. Can you talk about your strategies for leading a team through things that are not done before or that are unknown?
I think to me, the trick is that you've got to, as a leader, you've got to bring out the child in everybody. So, the secret to being able to imagine a future and make it happen is to be free to do it, to awaken that inner child and let your imagination run free. And the benefit of dealing with a lot of technical people, engineers and the like, is that they can actually envision how to do it. So not only do you allow them to let their imagination run free, but you encourage them to think of a way to do it and to plan out how to do it. And I think that's very delicate, because the first thing we have to do is, especially with engineers, is remove the fear of being wrong. When you're guessing about the future, the one thing you know is you're going to get it wrong. You don't know by how much or in which direction, but you will be wrong. You won't get it perfect. So it's very hard for engineers, given their training, given their background, given their personalities, to knowingly step out, knowing that they don't have the right answer. They can't possibly have the right answer. And so you've got to create an environment where they're comfortable making those leaps and putting their opinion out there without any backing, without any data to say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, other than their gut instinct, if you will. So I think that's really the environment you've got to create to free people to be willing to do that and able to do that, and away from their regular day-to-day job where we count on them to be right 99% of the time.
So what strategies, we're kind of talking about as we morph over to communication as well, what strategies do you employ to foster effective communication and collaboration when your team is so diverse and they are some that are still working remote and some that are in the office and the hybrid? How do you navigate that?
So I think everybody kind of knows the few basic communication themes, communicate often and clearly, know your level of the audience and stay at that level. Like, don't try to go above or below their understanding of the topic. Always have the people you communicate with repeat the message back to you to make sure it's clear and it was understood. So those are kind of basic things. And, like everybody else, I'm always trying to improve my skills around those basics. But beyond that, I like Aristotle's modes of persuasion. If you go right back to your college days, the logos, the ethos, and the pathos modes of persuasion. So the logos is, the logical argument. We do this because, and here's the facts that support the because. The ethos being the character and credibility of the speaker or whoever's trying to convince you to do it, and the pathos being the emotional argument. And the reason that's important is because all of us have a tendency to react to one of those, or two of those, and that's our comfort zone. But we've got to realize that other people may have a different comfort zone and a different language that they understand. So if you talk to a person who's emotionally motivated by an emotional argument, and you try to tell them logic around why you should do something, you're not talking their language. You might as well be talking Spanish to them. So, I think it's very important that you always, in your communication, you always try to have elements of all three arguments if possible. And if you go back and look at the great speeches, the Martin Luther King speeches, the John F. Kennedy space exploration speech. Those speeches, you can pick out elements of all three modes of persuasion that are really well highlighted in those speeches, and that makes how powerful they are. So I'm always working to try to get that skill perfected and make sure that I'm always using that. If I was left to my own comfort zone, I would talk to a certain type of person and probably be quite persuasive to them, but miss out totally on the other types of personalities. And again, what that's going to lead to is a non-diverse team that only views things through one lens, which is not what I want to have.
I missed that class. Hold on. What was that called? We didn't teach that at Georgia Tech. Pathos. No. We didn't have any of that stuff, man. I need to go back and pick up a book on that one. That's awesome. So Dr. Gallant, this has been really helpful and inspiring. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for being on the conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Joining me on the conversation today is John Miles, former U.S. Navy officer, Fortune 50 senior executive, award-winning host of the Passion Struck podcast, and author of the 2024 book Passion Struck, 12 Powerful Principles to Unlock Your Purpose and Ignite Your Most Intentional Life, which I think has already won some awards. Congratulations on that, and thanks for joining me on the show today.
Hey, Clint, it is so nice to be here, and what an honor to get to serve your audience.
All right, looking forward to it. So you were sharing your journey from Naval Academy, the Navy, and then senior executive, and then on where you are today. Is any other key moments in your adult life that maybe shaped or experienced your career path?
Yeah, I think there are a number. I'll go back to my running career. When I was in high school, I never thought I was going to do anything with running. I never thought I would be any good at it at all. I kind of grew up as an overweight kid, and I was trying to change my body image going into high school, which is the reason I started to run, was to lose some weight. And my freshman year started out with me being kind of indoctrinated by the seniors on the team, which is pretty common. But the seniors on the team were honestly kind of goofballs who didn't really care about the team winning. But I had some classmates who were really serious about it. So having that conscious realization to break away from the bad influences who were these seniors and to start trying to immerse myself with those who actually gave a damn about winning and were serious about training was something that really was an initial introduction into what toxic people in our lives can do to us and how they can take us away from what could be our best lived moments because they steer us in directions that are counterproductive to where we want to go. And by getting more immersed with those better athletes, when you're with people and you're training with people who are better than you, it ends up just up-leveling your game because you're trying to keep up. You're trying to be better. You're learning from their attitude, from the disciplined way that they're doing things. And so over time, you start adopting those behaviors yourself. And going into my sophomore year, I really had this strong aversion to competing, meaning I would almost psych myself out by becoming so nervous, even to the point of throwing up sometimes because I was so anxious before we raced. And so I started to learn that I needed to treat every single day of practice as if it was actually the meet. And by doing that, I conditioned myself to start putting myself into hardship on an everyday basis and not allowing myself to get psyched out because I was developing this mindset that if I treat every day as it's the race day, then when I get to the race, I'm not scared about how I'm going to perform because I'm already giving it my all. And that really changed my outlook, not only on running, but how I prepared myself later in life for tests, whether it was going on combat missions or having to give a presentation to Michael Dell or the CEO of Lowe's, and not psyching myself out before it, but being prepared and knowing that I had the self-confidence going in that I was going to do the best job that I possibly could.
What a brilliant way to solve that problem. I don't think I could have done that. I think that I would have said, I'm just going to throw up that many more days now, so I'm not even going to go down that path. So good for you. How do you define self-leadership, and why do you think it's critical for leaders to cultivate this skill?
When I think of self-leadership, I think of a quote that Sharon Salzberg, the author and philosopher, has said in the past. There's no commodity that we can take with us. There's only our lives. And this is my favorite part. Whether we live them wisely or whether we live them in ignorance. And this is everything. And to me, when I think of self-development, it's making the choice that she talks about. Are you going to live your life wisely, or are you going to live it with ignorance? Because both of them are a choice. And I think that's the thing we fail to see in life, is that every day we have tens of thousands of choices that we get to make. And most of the time, we end up living our life, I know a lot of people say, on autopilot, but I think it's the wrong analogy to how so many people are living today, because even when the plane is on autopilot, it's still going typically in a positive direction. I think the better analogy for how so many people are living today is if they're pinballs. And instead of playing the game of pinball and learning how to master it, we let the game master us. And the same thing happens with life. We are so unintentional about how we're living it that we let the distractions in the game of life or pinball basically take us on the path that our life goes. And so a lot of what my focus has been on teaching people is that everything, whether it's your physical health, your mental health, the strength of your relationships, your career, your financial success, are all built upon having the autonomy of the choices that you make. And it's really the choices that we make in the micro moments of life that have the most profound, long-standing difference in our lives. It really shapes, are we taking a path that's going to be to greatness, or are we taking a path that leads to, as Sharon says, ignorance or a valley of despair? And it's really that multitude of choices that build upon each other that take you in one of those two directions. And I think that's what really self-development, self-mastery is really all about, is choosing to live your life wisely.
That's a very powerful ending. John Miles, thanks for the conversation.
Clint, thank you so much for having me. It was such an honor to be here.
Thank you for joining me on the special look back edition of The Conversation. As we move further into the second half of 2024, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for your support and for being part of the incredible discussions we've had so far this year. Here's to continuing our journey with even more engaging conversations, fresh perspectives, and valuable insights. Stay tuned for some really fantastic guests ahead.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.